Ladies and gentlemen, if any of you have ever gotten into the game of chess, then you probably know the name Magnus Carlsen. Magnus Carlsen is the world champion. He is the best player of the last something like 3 decades and arguably the greatest chess player of all time. He is featured widely, not just on this YouTube channel, but on many, many channels because he is an algorithm buster and he fascinates the most novice of individual that follows the 64 squares. Now, the thing I'm going to share with you in this video, you may have never heard of before. There was a period between 2018 and 2020 when Magnus Carlsen did not lose a chess game in 125 games. 800 days. He did not lose a classical game of chess, meaning the prestigious one, the long one, 90-minute, 120-minute, the ultra-elite type of chess that exists. And in this video, I will be taking you through some of these games. I'm not going to do a deep dive analysis on all of them because they would require 15, 20-minute videos each, but we are going to go through this absolutely monster streak. 125 games. What? Has that ever happened? He won or drew 125 games in a row. Think about that number. That is nuts. Now, this is the game that he lost. This was July 2018, July 31st, 2018, and we are in Biel, all right? We are in Switzerland. Magnus is playing the Biel Chess Festival, and his opponent is Shahryar Mamedyarov from Azerbaijan. Magnus plays a King's Indian defense with knight c6, and then tries to explode the center right away with d5. Now, Mamedyarov is a very, very good dynamic player, and in this game, it's dynamic indeed, as he seizes the center with d5, bishop d2, and a very, very unbalanced position arises where Mamedyarov does not have the bishop pair, but he has a lot of potential ability to just march down the center of the board. So first he pokes at Magnus's structure, and then here come the pawns. And Magnus's light squared bishop never really got comfortable in this game, and here you see Mamedyarov playing d6. Now, the computer still evaluates this position as around equal, all right? But the problem is that since this pawn managed to make it all the way up the board while Magnus is dealing with it, Mamedyarov will be able to play things like rook fd1, and now if you take the knight, he gets this, the pawn survives, and the light squared bishop will hunt the rest of the pawns for white. So actually, Magnus was on the back foot throughout this game, and Mamedyarov maneuvered beautifully. He was up a pawn for most of the game, and normally opposite colored bishops, meaning light versus dark, end in draws, okay? You can be up a pawn, even 2 pawns sometimes, in opposite colored bishop endgames, and that will be good enough to make a draw. That is not what Mamedyarov had in mind. He sent it to a rook and bishop endgame, and notice when rooks are on the board, including the bishop, it's very difficult to defend, and Magnus did his best, but Mamedyarov was just an avalanche in this game, constantly moving forward, brought his rooks in to remove the defenders of the position. Magnus fought, and he fought, and he fought, but unfortunately, in the 50s, move 57, it was Mamedyarov promoting his pawn indeed, and Magnus resigned. This was Magnus's loss on July 31st, 2018. And let me tell you something right now. Some of the chess world probably wishes that it did not happen. On the very next day, Magnus Carlsen showed up. This is August 1st, 2018. The first game after he was defeated by Mamedyarov, little did Magnus know he was about to pop off for 125 games. He is playing against the Swiss local player, Nico Georgiadis, strong grandmaster, 25-26, would pulverize most of us. This man, Magnus, this is a real thing. He played knight a3 on the side. Just resign at that point. Like, really. Magnus is showing up, and he is playing the sodium attack Sicilian. For those of you that don't know, starting the game on move 1, knight a3, which Magnus has also done before, is known as the sodium attack, because you play it when you're salty AF, as the kids say. All right? When you live in a salt mine. Knight a3 is ridiculous. His opponent was like, what do I even do? G6... and they just played a normal game. Magnus just acted like, you know, he used his bishop, and then he played king f1. I mean, knight a3, king f1. I mean, what are you gonna do? Go plays knight f3, knight a3 and king f1 against you. And then Magnus blocked up the center. Bishop c4, queen c4. And I love how his opponent's just like, dude, I gotta trade the pieces. Like, let's just go to an endgame and Hopefully I don't lose in the endgame. And Magnus played queen b5, knight e5, and all of a sudden, you know, black is under some pressure here. And the game very quickly became an endgame, indeed. And an endgame where actually black has a pretty substantial advantage. I mean, hopefully, considering the guy started with knight a3 on the second move. So it looked like Magnus was just going to lose 2 in a row. So what did he do? He took the pawn. His opponent played king e7, delaying the recapture of the pawn because knight c4, there is just b5. And now this was the position. I mean, it's rook and knight and 6, rook bishop 6, dead equal position. Magnus brings his king, knight c2, knight e1. His opponent plays c4, trying to restrict the knight. Magnus plays knight d2, and the knight is dancing. And black is doing okay. a3, a5. All right, there's still nothing. Magnus has said absolutely nothing in this game. Rook f1, and now rook d3. And I mean, it's terrible, right? Rook f3, and all black has to do now is go here, 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 and he will never lose. He will absolutely never lose. He will never, ever lose. Rook d1, rook d5, knight comes back, bishop c7, and all of a sudden, we might have a repetition. King g6. No repetition of moves. Rook e4, rook d4, take. Knight. Magnus's opponent blundered the fact that knight f3 wins the game. His opponent played this with the intention of going here, sacrificing, and this. But knight d2 stops everything. And I got news for you. You cannot defend this, or this, or this, or this. His opponent made one bad move. One. His opponent played 46 moves, 45 moves of good chess. One move he made wrong, he lost. He just lost on the spot. If you're confused why this is losing, there is no way to stop the white knight from winning this pawn. And since you cannot stop the white knight from winning this pawn, you cannot stop the white knight from either winning that pawn or that pawn. So with one pawn push, his opponent lost 2 pawns and the whole game. I mean, you can't script this stuff. Magnus shows up to the board after losing to Mamedyarov, plays knight a3 on the second move, is just getting... Dude is putting up a ridiculous fight, 320 points lower rated. Yes, they have the same title, but, I mean, come on, Magnus is in another league. 45 good moves, and knight f3, and the game is over. And that was just the beginning of the end, folks. That was the beginning of the end for the chess world, because 2019 was the year of redemption. Magnus won. He defended his World Chess Championship in 2018, but that, you know, he didn't win a classical game. He lost some rapid and blitz games, but not classical. 2019, Magnus shows up. Look who his opponent is. It's January. We're in Tata Steel in the Netherlands, and Magnus needs to build up this streak by getting revenge. Dead symmetrical position. Completely symmetrical, I mean, with the exception of the rook. And Magnus is fighting against Mamedyarov. He needs to get revenge. The man that defeated him, completely equal game. But over the course of the middle game, Mamedyarov gets a little too feisty. Little bit too feisty with his pawns here. And Magnus gets in on the dark squares. Now, the position is still very tense, very locked. But Magnus picks off a pawn. Knight e3, takes, Mamedyarov comes in, takes the rook. We go to an endgame, all right? It's very tense still, but Magnus has pawn potential. He can move these pawns. And the game comes down to the wire as Mamedyarov's pawns confidently march forward. It's an ocean of pawns. Takes. The king is on the verge of being mated. G3, king h3, rook h1. And a move before Mamedyarov can deliver checkmate. A move before there is g3 and rook h1 mate, king to f4. It looks like everyone's come to checkmate the white king. Magnus sacrifices his knight. And Mamedyarov resigns because he now no longer has this, he no longer has this, and if you take the knight, you're too slow. A rook cannot stop 2 pawns like this. Just cannot stop them. You can come back and try to mate me, but I queen with check. So Magnus gets revenge on the man who beat him in 2018. defeating Shahryar Mamedyarov. And for the duration of 2019, Magnus was busting out the Sveshnikov Sicilian. All right? He was playing this, which we'll see a little bit later in this video. He was playing this because he played it in his World Championship match. And folks, no one could even get close to Magnus, to the point they started playing knight c3 like Peter Svidler did in this game to avoid the Sveshnikov. Magnus struck fear into his opponent's hearts on move 2. Imagine fearing what your opponent is going to play on the second move. He played c5 and knight c6 because he had spent months preparing for the World Championship against Fabiano Caruana, where all he played was one opening, the Sveshnikov defense in the Sicilian. So e5. And in this game against Peter Svidler, Peter decided, all right, we're not going to play a Sicilian. I'm going to play the ultra mega bind variation. All right, I'm just going to control the light squares and drink my coffee. And what Magnus was doing to people back then was he was moving his king out of the way and he was smashing them on the king side. Just playing f5, doesn't matter if you have to give up your bishops. I'm going to open the position, I'm going to win my pawn back, and we're going to come here, and here, and here, and we're going to deliver a mate. And it is going to be absolutely brutal. He was doing this to everybody. He was doing this, I am not joking, to everybody. Look at this position for black. I mean, it's only slightly better, but it's just a matter of time. Peter Svidler is an 8-time champion of Russia. Do you know what it takes to be an 8-time champion of anything? You could be an 8-time champion of losing your queen. Peter Svidler was the 8-time chess champion of Russia, the country with probably single-handedly the greatest chess culture. Right now, it might be tied with India because everybody in India is just an extremely good chess player. But Russia and India are far and away, all right, far and away the two countries with, I mean, historically it's probably Russia. Modern day, it's probably India, but it's just ridiculous. He brought his knight. Knight g4. Knight e3. Rook e8. The queen's got to go. And here, Magnus played g5. The arrival of the knight into the white position, posing unbelievable problems to the king. The bishop is just, it just looks nice, but it has no value because there is nothing on the light squares. The black king is comfortably tucked away, and the rooks, combined with the pawn and the knight, are just going to rain blows. And folks, it was just a matter of time. Rook f8, pawn takes, and in gorgeous fashion, Magnus delivered a pawn checkmate. G2 defended by the knight, H2 defended by the queen. The white king made it in the corner. Magnus was making it look so simple. And folks, when people went into his Sicilian defense, like Sergei Karyakin did, also in 2019 early, this is the main line. This is exactly what they played in the World Chess Championship match. They threatened us with a repetition after 10 moves. Sergei, to his credit, did not repeat moves. Knight c3, g3, bishop e7, and Magnus sacrificed the pawn, just gave up a full pawn, gave up the whole h5 pawn, and Sergei attacked him on the queen side with c5, and Magnus said, pawn takes, c4 to disconnect your queen and your knight, b5, I'm raining it down on the queen side, b4, get out of here, bishop e4, hello, mate is coming, queen f5, you can try to kick me out, I got queen g6 hitting that pawn, now in comes my knight, queen slides out of danger, and Sergei tried to give up his bishop to take this bishop. Magnus had backup though, he had backup plans, rook e8, hello, right? Queen g2, bishop d4, he took the pawn, and he just brought his rook, and he brought his second rook. And Karyakin just resigned in this position. Now you may ask yourself, what? Why did he resign? Why is it -10? It's equal material. You know why it's -10? Because black is about to go, let's say white just plays a3. Knight takes f4, pawn takes f4, rook takes f4, and there is absolutely no way to stop mate. If you play queen h3, I will come here and here. And white is paralyzed completely. The knight is a spectator. The rook hasn't moved. 40 moves, the rook hasn't moved. How are you going to play a game with no rook and knight? Look at what Magnus did to Wait, why is Sergei Karyakin a photo of Peter Svidler? What? What? Huh? I swear I put in a picture of Karyakin. Okay, well, that's not... Peter Svidler did not play 2 games. It's just the same photo for some reason. Funny. Hey, remember this guy, Yan Nepomniachtchi? Well, in 2019, he did not play against Magnus for a world championship, but he did play against Magnus. And look what he did. He also tried to take Magnus out of a Sveshnikov. He was like, nope, I'm gonna attack him, all right? The only way to beat Magnus is to attack him. I'm gonna attack him, put my knight in the center, all right? I'm gonna play G4, look at this. Now Magnus can't even play F5, got him. He can't beat me. He can't beat me. I play G4, he can't play F5. Magnus is not going to beat me. A4, he can't play B5, he can't play B5, can't play D5, can't play F5. That's it. I found the anti-Magnus strategy. I'm gonna win. Knight D4, Knight D5, and Magnus just needs the tiniest of them. Knight F4, all right. You want to play a closed position? Let's play a closed position. All right, I'll play a closed position. Bishop C3, now I take. Now you have a very uncomfortable situation because if you take like this, you block all of this and you know what's coming, F5. The move that you have spent the entire game preventing, the move that the entire chess world tried to prevent Magnus from playing in 2019. No F5. Do not open up the position, so he took like this. So Magnus said, all right, if I can't get F5, I'll get B5. Just the thought in 2019 of Magnus opening the position against you in a Sicilian defense was a nightmare because now pawn takes, C4. And he took pawn takes. Uh-oh. Bishop is coming. I don't even need F5. I don't need to play the move F5. I have completely forgotten about the move F5. I will not be playing. Dear God. Dear God. No. No. The idea, if you take like this, Queen E3 comes in, Bishop D4 comes in, and I arrive down the E file. But if you take like this, I open it this way. And now I'm coming in on crisscross applesauce, Queen and Bishop. He's in. Check. Pawn takes F3. The second that Magnus got to play F5 in this game against Yan Nepomniachtchi, it was over. It was over. Melted like butter. F5 was the move that every player wanted to prevent Magnus from playing in 2015. I'm telling you, when Magnus got to play a Sicilian and several moves later would successfully play F5, it was over. I mean, it was just, the game ended. You might as well resign right there. In this game from the opening, Jan looked like he did everything you're supposed. He stopped Magnus from playing every important pawn break that he was supposed to play. And Magnus maneuvered and outmaneuvered him and succeeded in playing one break and one second break. Oh my God. I mean, and Magnus beat Svidler, Karyakin, Nepomniachtchi. Folks, we're just getting started. Look at the next name on your screen. You all know Hikaru. This was from the Grand Chess Tour in Zagreb in Croatia. All right, this was a Queen's Gambit declined. It was a relatively symmetrical game, and then the board exploded. Bishop takes knight. Rook takes bishop. Bishop takes pawn. Bishop A4, pinning the queen to the rook. Knight takes pawn. Rook under pressure. Bishop under pressure. Knight under pressure. Queen. Everything is interacting with everything. Rook D3, Queen B2, and Magnus danced out of the way of danger, then sacrificed his bishop in front of Hikaru's king. Grabbed this pawn, jumped his knight into the middle, and when the dust settled, what happens in Magnus's games when the dust settles? He emerges in an endgame where he is pressuring. It's a 3-on-4 endgame, but it's worse than that. It's not a 3-on-4, it's a 3-on-1. That is the problem. The 2-on-1 will barely get moving, because it's constantly monitored by the superior set of pieces. So Hikaru tried his best to defend, but Magnus actually went after that side of the board first, completely stopped that pawn, rook hitting this, and now these pawns will just go. And before they even had a chance to get moving, Hikaru just threw in the towel here because he can't move. The knight cannot come forward at all. Anywhere it comes, it will probably just get taken, and you cannot defend this position. Rook G5, Rook F5, I will win the pawn, your pawn will not move, and I will have a 3-on-0. And Magnus was he just made it look like I don't know, 28-75, and we will get to that later, by the way. We will get to that later. His next game against Dingley Ren. Dingley Ren, I mean, he's beating the best players in the world. In this game, Magnus was black. He wasn't even playing with the white pieces, and it wasn't even a Sicilian. It was a Catalan. Magnus played b5, an ultra-aggressive line. He was so confident in 2019, just fighting these guys off like it was nothing, inviting danger, defending positions. Look at that pawn on c7. Look at it. And now g5! It takes confidence to play like this with black. And when you are vaporizing, folks, I mean, that's what happens. It doesn't matter. Endgame, middle game, rook and two bishops versus rook, bishop, knight. It doesn't matter. The slightest of advantages is enough. And in this game, it took two bishops. This is the position. This is the position that he won. 5 pawns, a knight and bishop. How do you win stuff like this? Well, you bring your bishops back, and now you try to isolate your opponent's pawns on the right color complex. You know that with the bishops, you can be across the board like this in a private jet and hunting your opponent's pawns. King e2, h5, bishop d7, patience. He grabs the pawn. Yes, his bishop is trapped, but hello, hello. And now that pawn is going to be the difference. Bishop f4, and Magnus just comes forward with his pieces, walks the king down the center, literally just into the center and into the white position. And white cannot stop this and the advancement of the pawn. And it took a few more moves, and Dingley Ren resigned because he was going to lose all the rest of his pawns, and Magnus would promote. Magnus winning with black too, like just winning with black, like nothing. And the final game that I would like to show you, yet another name on your screen, yet another victim of the M train in 2019, knight f3, an Italian this time against Wesley So, h3, h6, totally symmetrical game, bishop b5, and Magnus, from the early opening, took us to a game that looked like this. Again, I mean, folks looked like they were getting comfortable positions against him. Look at this. He can't move any pawn. His pawns look awful. How is he going to make any progress in this game? Well, first he's going to try to move his knight. He's going to try to bring his knight forward. And his king. All right, his bishop is going back to its home square. How is he going to make any progress here? Rook b1, rook b8. I mean, how do you defend this position? You bring your knight. You bring your king. You slide your bishop back. You replace the knight, the bishop square with the knight. Now the knight jumps to the middle. Knight takes, pawn takes. Now you've undoubled your pawns. King comes forward. Pawn locks the center. Takes. Black tries to activate his position, but rook b6. The point is that Wesley couldn't just sit there. If Wesley just sat there trying to pretend like everything was okay, like king f6, Magnus would play something like g4, would play something like bishop e3, and black is just going to run out of moves. Black literally has no more moves. If he moves the knight, he stops guarding the rook and bishop takes. If he moves the rook, they take the pawn. If you move the rook there, I take the pawn. He froze Wesley's position completely. From a position that looked harmless, completely untouchable. And what do you know? Magnus emerges in another endgame with 2 passed pawns, and Wesley resigns. Because he's just going to go e5, e6, d7, and that's it, and just make a queen. d8, rook e8, make a queen. Folks, Magnus's streak was stopped in October of 2020 in Norway Chess, when Magnus played against Jan Krzysztof Duda. And I do have a video about that game too, which is why I'm not putting it into this video. 125 slow games over 800 days. Slow chess, he did not lose. He, during this streak, hit his all-time high rating in August of 2019 of 2,882 officially and unofficially, meaning in between months, because ratings are posted officially at the beginning of every month. Unofficially, he was 2,889. He did not lose a chess game in 125 attempts. That is so ridiculous. I don't think I can emphasize that enough. Imagine you played 125 games, you'd lose 62 of them. That's on average 50%. Some of us win 55%, 60%. Some of us win 45% because chess is hard. Guys, he didn't lose a game in 800 days. What? Again, I emphasize slow games. Did he lose blitz and bullet games online? Yes. But in the highest level of competition, in the slowest form of chess possible, which is classical, in the prestigious type of chess, which is classical, the highest type of accuracy of chess, he didn't lose in 2 years and 2.5 months. What? Yo, get out of here.